And I've been working in that sector since 2005, so it's a long time now. But 10 years ago, we were at I was leading a network meeting, and at the end of that meeting, colleagues of mine, we were getting together, 20 different agencies getting together and working out things that we wanted to develop and do better. We focused on the idea of how do we know that the work we're doing is actually doing any good, or is making any progress, or how will we notice that collaboration between these different organizations was working well? How do we know that? And that question, there were three of us who kind of started to work on it, is the reason why we're here today. I had one thought prior to this earlier today, was that I really, really appreciate questions. And I know that this group is really, really good at asking questions. So I'm very much hoping that you will be unrestrained in your abilities to ask really, really good questions. Please don't hold back. And I do have some questions from Marika.
Well, would you like me to ask you them, Jonas?
Oh, if you've got them in front of you, that's probably
I've got them. So let me ask you the first question, which is, could you tell us more about your line of work at the Dalecarlia Coordination Agency, right, so that the audience get an impression of the sphere and scope of your work, please?
Right. Well, that's probably the most difficult question for me to answer today, but I'm going to give it a go, because my kids, I mean, they told me after they'd been through hell through school, and and when their fellow students or friends or teachers asked them, "What does your father do for a living?" they still haven't worked out what he does. So if they don't really know, we're going to give it a go in this room. We'll see what happens. But there's a very Swedish construct called a coordination agency, and it's been around for almost, or more than 15 years now. No, 20 years, or 20 years now, almost 20 years. And it enables the equivalent of a social insurance office, which in Sweden is nationally organized, the job center, which is also nationally organized, the municipalities, which are locally, there are 290 of them in Sweden, and they do social work, for instance, and the hospitals and the healthcare sector, which is regional in Sweden. 4 different sectors to combine their efforts and support financially, and supporting and facilitate and help create and further develop joined up ways of working, so that people who are fall between the cracks, in Sweden we say fall between chairs, but that doesn't really translate so well, but people who kind of get between silos, and those people who have a hard time navigating the way we organize public health work around unemployment and long-term health issues, often psychiatric, mental health. Anyway, and so these organizations work together, and in Sweden, nearly all the municipalities are organized in these coordination agencies. So nearly all of them. There's only 20 municipalities who are not in. So 270 out of 290 are part of one coordinating agency, and there are roughly around 80 agencies around Sweden. So many of them, have groups of municipalities within them, but they're all these 4 different sectors are part of every one. And I've been working for one of them, but also working for the network for all of these organizations together on a national kind of scale, where we kind of talk to the government, the parliament, national agencies, user organizations. So I've been very much a part of that work as well, as apart from working locally where I am in South Dalecarlia. This is an area in central Sweden, I guess. And I've been working in that sector since 2005. So it's a long time now. But 10 years ago, we were at I was leading a network meeting, and at the end of that meeting, with colleagues of mine, we were getting together, 20 different agencies getting together and working out things that we wanted to develop and do better. We focused on the idea of how do we know that the work we're doing is actually doing any good, or is making any progress, or how will we notice that collaboration between these different organizations was working well? How do we know that? And that question, there were three of us who kind of started to work on it, is the reason why we're here today, because that kind of took off and it created, and within a couple of years, we created and got support from half of all the organizations around Sweden, and we had money coming in from the government. There was crowdfunding going on. We had collaborations with Örebro University, which is Sweden's top university when it comes to collaboration research. We had the national agencies who are working with indicators on board, helping us do the work. And I was kind of in the middle facilitating all of that. And now we're on to our, seventh annual report. We gather in around 5,000 different forms. We gather in lots of interviews where people write answers, and then you gather them up and try to create. So on a national scale, how will we know that we were together doing good work? Where we ask around, we ask people what they would notice, and that we collate and gather and on a national scale and show it to the parliament, to government. We write reports, we have seminars, we try to spread the knowledge. We meet with different, civil servants and leaders from these different organizations, and we have a discussion. So there's lots and lots of opportunities for conversations. Does that kind of answer the question, I suppose?
I think so, to start with. So what you've been doing is coordinating the efforts of these agencies, right?
Yeah.
And, so maybe we can move on to Marika's second question, which would be the one I would have as well, which is, what have you learned about SF at large scale in this demanding work that you're doing? Now, I know you could answer this for several hours probably, but I'm going to ask you to limit it to a few points.
2 things. No. So how I'm trying to limit it. Well, there was a similar kind of question. I was asked to do something in Copenhagen for Jesper. He had a conference on OD development. So I'm kind of building on from that. And the first kind of scary thing is, I don't think there's a formula that you can do everywhere and then it will work everywhere and everything will be brilliant. I think it's way much more complex than that. But so I don't want to be cocky enough to say that I know how to do it. Because if I knew how to do it, I would write the book and I would be very rich. And I'd probably co-opt every other issue and try to change that as well. And it would be brilliant. It would just like the way I wanted it. It wouldn't work. I think the process has its own life and it's unique for itself. And I engage with it on those premises. And I think that's fair to say that's fairly common when it comes to meeting individuals too. I mean, we meet, have a coaching conversation or a therapy conversation, and we say to ourselves, yes, this client is unique, this client is different. And I think the process is unique too. Sure, we'll look at it and we'll find things that are replicated and we can recognize stuff. But when you're in it, it's not replicated at all. It's all alive and changing and moving at the same time. And it's completely co-created in the moment. For me, going into this, I was fairly new to the game. So I was very curious about everything that was happening. And I think that's a strength that I reflected upon during the process, but also now it's becoming even more important that everybody was invited to this. Everybody who wanted to be part of it, and I spread my net really wide. Every email I wrote was, inclusive and open and appreciative. Every meeting I had the same vibe, the same tone. Every conference we arranged, every seminar we had, there was this very open everybody's invited attitude involved. And there are people who were, everybody doesn't join in on the same premise. Some of them are more skeptical, some of them are more laid back, some of them are very much eager to be at the front and want to take over. Everybody is invited, everybody is acknowledged, everybody is a resource, and it really had to put me in a different position. I mean, I was one of the leaders myself, but I couldn't really be that. I had to resign myself to be this facilitator role and just look out and take care of what was happening or emerging, and also work very well with, I think you and I have spoken about that before, Mark, about designing spaces for these types of conversations. How do we, what happens before is 70% of the work. How do we arrange the chairs? How do we arrange, when people come in, is there going to be time for a mingle so they can talk to each other? Is there going to be, when people arrive into these rooms, whether they're digital or in real life, is that what is already there that they're, that allows them to be their most creative, or to be their most best at their best. There was a lot of those kind of things going on for me. So which means that my focus was not on the actual results per se. I wasn't arguing for one position or the other. I was actually working very much for the process itself and treating the process as something very alive, unscripted, fresh and new. And it's still very fresh and new. It's still has its own life, and has its own beast in a way. And I think that's really important to respect that and work with it on those premises. The third thing I learned, and I think this is really weird because we've been talking about this a lot in the macro analysis group too, that in the role that micro processes play in the macro kind of processes. I mean, small things are really important. So I remember, the care I take into writing an email, which I know is going to be read by hundreds of people, or an invitation to the representatives of Parliament. How that email is written and how that invitation is there's a lot of art into that, I imagine. I mean, there's a lot of weighing words. There's a lot of but also it's not a formula, but so everyone is new, but there's this taking care of the process in very minute details. And one of the things that we've been talking about, and I've been talking more about, is also talking about tone and gestures and rhythms and going fast and going slow. It's not about what we're actually doing, but how we're doing it, which is more important than the actual seminar itself. We did a conference, and then we had an interview which we publicized, or we did all these different small things. Yes, but there's a tone that goes through all of them, which is very similar, which is very warm, inviting, and curious, and dare I say humble, because nobody really knew what they were doing. Or at least I didn't know what I was doing. So I was very curious and inviting people in to share what they could offer and make it come alive, and just taking care of that. And I really find myself being really conservative, and I'm not, in a political sense, I'm not conservative. I'm not going to talk about politics here, but my idea about politics, conservatives, like, change is very, very slow. And I want to take care of what's been alive for a long time ago, and I want that to stay. But I found myself as a facilitator very much in a conservative kind of go very, very slow kind of tone. Don't go too fast. If there are questions coming up, great questions, but let's wait on the answers and wait till the moment is ripe, so that everybody can say, yes, we took a decision. Yes, now we can go forward. I found that coming back a lot. I'm pretty amazed by just how those kind of micro processes and tone of voice, feeling, gestures, textures, sorry, those kind of things which are not mine by design, but are created together. Those kind of things are becoming more and more important to me.
So I'm hearing what you're saying about going very slowly, about each process is unique, and obviously there's good solution focused connections in that. So how did you figure out what to do next?
I suppose the way we do with any solution focused programs, we ask questions, right? And we partner up. And I think that's something that's becoming more clear to me now. We partner up more than we ask questions. We get alongside each other. You know, we get together as a group, and we work together. So, like, you know, it's not a tennis court kind of thing. I'm on one side and the other one's on the other. I get next to the player, and we start. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So where do we go from here? And we do that as a partner. And we do this in groups. And we would do this all the time. As soon as a question come up, we'd create groups that will come up with some kind of clue of how we could move on, and then we'll bring that to a larger group, and then we'll bring this to an even larger group, and then finally the group was so big that said, "Yeah, time is right for a decision now. Let's do it," and then we'll do it. So there's a lot of partner upping, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And this is interesting too. I often find myself partnering up with people that I didn't expect, you know, unexpected allies, or, you know, the coalition became larger than I thought it was, or and people like other people will think were on the fringes were actually very much centrally involved and contributing. So I find that kind of interesting dynamic itself, that how people joined in and who joined in when and how. That was very flexible. It changed a lot during the process. But it's interesting how certain people on the fringes who maybe didn't collaborate a lot with coordination agencies found themselves very central to the process, like user organizations, for instance. I had a few contacts in Stockholm, and they really contributed so much to the process. I mean, we were asking questions. Part of the thing of creating these indicators, how would we know that change was happening, was asking questions to people who were users, and they had so much to contribute, and they weren't really part of the process at all prior to what we were doing. So just finding people and partnering up with them, I think was. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, let's go. So I asked you, how did you decide what to do next? And
yes,
you're talking about these different people from all over the place. So let me ask you a slightly different question, which is how did you decide who to invite next? Because you've got lots of organizations, you're working across boundaries. Mm. You know, do you get all 5,000 of them in the room at once? I guess not. No, so how did you decide as it emerged what to do or who to involve?
I mean, I mean, we did write a plan every year, but we never followed it. I'm not going to say we had a plan, but we did have continuous discussions, especially those who were most centrally involved. You know, who do we invite? Who do we talk to? Who's next? You know, who, and we were very open with what happened at every meeting. Or so we created a steering group where everybody was invited to, and that group was roughly around 20-25 people every time, and that group kind of made the decisions on a kind of month by month basis. You know, what do we do next? I think that's part of the partnering up process. You know, you partner up with the people who are wanting to participate in that on that level of the project itself. You know, working on maybe not operatively. You know, they weren't working day to day on this. They were working more tactically, maybe. So, and not strategically, because we had another level of decision making, which was much more strategic, which was like a board of politicians. But they move very slowly, and they work very more on principles. So we went to them, so we weren't in control of the whole thing ourselves. It was in control of this board, but where there was different representatives of these different agencies on the board. But they were working on a much more slowly, more principled scale. But I was more involved on the tactical bit. or in between these different levels. So I think decisions were made very much in that kind of steering group kind of thing. But I would also say, I learned a lot from a boss that I used to work for, the social insurance office. He was really good at taking opportunities as they came. He was really good. I don't know if you met him, Mark. It was Henry Commerline, and he was really good at taking opportunities as they came. So when an opportunity just came, he took it, and took a risk. And I think we did a lot of that. So I mean, somebody calls up and say, "Yeah, do you want to meet them?" Yes, and can we invite them to our next meeting? And things just happened. And so we took a few risks. We muddled, I guess, and we took opportunities as we came, as well as had a kind of structure in place where things were more foreseeable. What's that called? When you can, people know how the process works anyway.
So my question would be, next question, you're talking about this emergent process and all sorts of people. So I suppose we beamed into one of those sessions. What would we see that would give us a clue that this was a solution focused thing, as opposed to just an emergent thing?
Well, I mean, every meeting will begin with a smile. Every meeting would begin with some version of what people are hoping for, or what or even before we even ask that question, we'll be asking something, what's working well, or what made you smile today, or something maybe irrelevant, but some are setting this tone for the next question, which would be more of a what are you hoping for from today, and we would spend time in that space, and pick up what's alive. And this would not only be on meetings like this on Zoom where we gather, but also on conferences, or even on seminars, in any type of meeting. There would be time spent on what are we hoping from today, what are our best hopes, or what will be the biggest difference from today's meeting, how will we know, etc. So that's there. I don't think there was there wasn't a lot of preferred future kind of work, which I find surprising in a way. We never I suppose we did sometimes, but it was much more practical. We worked on very small steps, but I don't think we ever really yes, there was some kind of guiding vision, I guess, about yes, we did that a lot in the beginning. Yes, we did. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm trying to recollect now. When we started, when we kind of based the whole project, I traveled around Sweden, and we had like 7 or 8 regional kind of conferences. And at every one of those conferences, we had a kind of preferred future. What if we had indicators that would tell us, if things were moving in the right direction, what difference would that make? And we asked people to portray that and describe and bring that up to the surface. And then we shared those pictures with everybody else, and we kind of created a picture. But apart from that, very much, there was the first 2-3 years of the project, we worked a lot with that. But then we got going with the practicalities of actually doing the work and asking around and gathering the intel and sharing what we've learned, and then asking questions about what made a difference when we saw differences emerging. But we've seen, for instance, that collaboration in Sweden improved during the pandemic, which was against everybody's expectations. So that created a lot of interest in how come we'd improved despite we didn't actually get to see each other in the way that we used to. And very surprising. Lots of interesting information came up from that, which spared more.
So thank you, Suzanne. Come in with the next question, please.
So what were your ways of designing social learning in this network? Can you remember? Tell us a story about that.
For the last kind of 5, 6, 7 years, we've been caught in this kind of a cycle, a yearly cycle, where we, once a year, at the end of October, we gather in all these respondents, all their all these 5,000 kind of come in from all these different agencies who are involved, and it's half of Sweden. So there's a lot of people involved, And then we gather that together, and then we publish it in the end of January. And then we have all these seminars where we share the results of what we've learned. We share the results of what people have given us, and then we have seminars. What does this all mean? And what we do is that we offer a series of seminars, workshops during April, May, June, August sometimes, where we pick up on we can't pick up on everything because it's huge. There's a lot of data, but we pick on different indicators, and we try to pinpoint certain agencies which have been doing it. They kind of they don't follow. They're not the main. They're different. They've either improved a lot, or they have results which far exceed everybody else's. So we invite them in, 3 or 4 of them at a time, to share good practice. And that is, I mean, you recognize it's very much solution focused. The whole thing is about what difference are they doing? How would they know? How would they making a difference? So please give us an answer of, what difference do you think you're doing? How is it your results so different from everybody else? What is it you think you're doing that's making a difference? And that itself is a process every agency itself is working on. So when we have this seminar, they've already processed this for a month or two, trying to figure out what's already working. And then they share it 10, 15 minutes, 3 or 4 agencies at a time. We have 2-hour seminars, take a break, and then we just free for all kind of open space, breakout rooms where people get to reflect and recognize things that they're already doing themselves, or being inspired by others to start doing, or being more curious about. And then we end it, and that very much unscripted, very similar formula, but and not documented. But we do this systematically. So every year it's a cycle. So we kind of work on what we're learning, share the learning, and then try and build on that. And that's part of it, I guess. It's a very kind of, in a way, kind of rigid structure, because now it's very people can anticipate that we have seasons where we gather data, we collate the data, we present the data, we discuss the data, then we do the whole thing again. So it becomes very kind of cyclical. So we go into these phases, and that kind of works. I mean, it's small. I mean, but it does make a difference. And these seminars that we do, and the conferences that we arrange, there's a lot of good learning going on there, and it's really interesting also that people get to be seen and heard, because often working in collaboration between organizations, they're not at the center of their organizations, they're often in the fringes. So we put the spotlight on them, and they don't often get the spotlight, and they always have really interesting things to say. So there's a lot of learning going on in those spaces. So
over to you, Marika. Any other questions you still have?
Yeah, I would like to add to that I think this is really a great way how you do it, because when you do it in a repeated manner, I think it also develops the quality of the observations people do in their daily work. So it's a kind of very positive spiral broadening year after year.
And there's something
and they learn to spot also something nice others do, which is really great.
Yeah. There is I mean, it's its own pandemic in a way. It is. But there was one thing as I thought I had. There's something about working in macro processes, because, I mean, the tone has to be somehow rigid enough so that it can't change all the time, because that would seem very chaotic. But working with all these different people, which I don't actually see all the time, because I mean it's like hundreds and hundreds of people who are a part of the process, but I don't talk to all of them, but they're part of the process. So there's something about being coherent and being, not rigid in a way, but being predictable and repetitive, and that repetitive predictability in my way of working, or in the tone of working, and in the process, or in the questions we use, and the way we work, and the spaces that are created, it's all very predictable. And even if you're not part of it every time, it sticks. You know, there's an appreciation. People know what they're getting into. People know what's expected of them. People kind of know what questions they're going to get asked. And there's something to be said about that, especially on a kind of macro level, that we work in a very predictable way, a very simple way. It's not very elaborate, not very complicated. It's kind of very simple questions that are repeated over and over again, or spaces that are very similar over and over again. There's something about that which I like.
That's great. How about tackling that question you asked, Marika, about finding ways to measure up to the national level? I thought that was an interesting question.
Yeah, I think that's really unique piece of Jonas's work, and something really remarkable what you have achieved. I was interviewing Jonas for this book about it, and I think there you have also created something which is in the same time light, repeatable, accelerates learning and really benefits the daily work, but fills the requirements of reporting to the national level. So I think that this is such a unique combination that you really have to tell more about that. And when I think your model of one inquiry for everybody, from very grassroots to the state treasury, is great, so that they just get a bit different questions, but it's the same inquiry. And there you have embedded also such questions I haven't seen anywhere else before, which are very solution focused, very much in line what you are supposed to achieve. But please tell more about that.
Yeah, that's a huge question. When we do these inquiry, we ask different groups of people. So we ask people who are part of the services during the part of their services, and also when they finish that part of the services that they're engaged in, when in collaboration with the different authorities. We ask the people that work with them, the professionals, the coaches, the job center people, the people who are actually working together in these teams of collaborating. We ask people who actualize people, who send people to these projects or to these different collaboration, joined up ways of working. So they get questions on how they see the quality of the work that they're observing and being part of. And those questions are very much SRS, ORS kind of like, SRS kind of like, the Scott Miller kind of, do you feel heard? Do you feel seen? Do you feel valued in that kind, in the collaboration? Are you participating in a way that you enjoy? We ask leaders who are working on a local but strategic level on designing and developing collaborative work, and we ask the politicians who actually make the decisions and evaluate and follow up the work on the quality of that work. And one thing that goes on between all of these groups is we ask questions of inclusivity. So Sweden's very big on equality, inclusive work. So in what way is the work inclusive and promotes equality? And so everybody is part of the process. And we ask for special signifiers of that if there's that going on or not. So that's part of the process that we ask around. We ask for every different type of perspective that we think is relevant to know if they have any input on the idea of the question. Is collaborative work actually improving? What signs that will be noticed? And those are embedded in the questions. But we ask around all these different perspectives, and then we have about 16 different indicators. So not hundreds and hundreds. So it's fairly simple. It's not too complicated. But every indicator might have different perspectives involved. If people feel that they are getting closer to work or being managed more work ability, we ask the users who are part of during the process and after the process. There are other indicators that are when they finish, when users finish a process, you know, when it's ended, when they're getting to the moving up on their closer to work, when they, you know, either start working or they go into another project, or they fail. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's not right for them right now. But they get a set of questions. We ask, how is that? You know, when one process ends, what is the quality of the next step in that space in between? How do they know that that's being cared for? Then we ask a whole bunch of people, what did they notice? And that's part of one indicator. So this is the way we embed the different perspectives into different indicators. And half of the indicators are on very like user service experiential level, but the other half is very much strategic, political, more structural level, about things that needs to be in place for these other things to happen. And then you asked about, you know, how we do that nationally. You know, we do that. We write this simple report, which is about 30 pages long, and there's a lot of, you know, extra material, of course, but we try to make it as simple as possible, so it's easily digestible. It's there's graphs. I can't do graphs. I'm terrible with graphs. But same thing. We use people who are part of the process and are very good at certain things, that we use them, and they collaborate, and we do this all as a team. So we're very, very happy now that we can have these like 5, 6, 7 year graphs, which show how things change over time, and that's really cool. And we also change the instrument a little bit during the times too. And sometimes questions become not manageable, or they have to be changed or tweaked. And sometimes it's brand new question, and sometimes just a little tweak. So that all makes a difference too in how we can collate the data and see development over time.
Yeah. So I wonder if we can sort of switch a little bit and ask everybody in the round to discuss a little bit, what have you noticed? Yeah, I've also put the reflecting team questions. They're just suggestions in the chat. Yeah, we begin with an affirmation phase. Everybody says one thing that impressed them, that you liked, that was an inspiration or whatever. And then the reflection phase. I wonder, this reminds me of, I did it in a similar way, maybe. So let's do one round, all of us together, yeah, with Jesper, Mark, myself, and could I ask Dominic to join us? Shall we start with affirmations? Yeah, what did you hear that you really liked? May I ask you, Dominic? You're the newest member of the group.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's so many things. I made a huge list. I will post it in the chat later on.
Thank you.
But there are so many things that impressed me. I think the first thing that Jonas said was really cool, that he said it's about collaborations, network. I'm in the middle, kind of facilitating, and I think that's the best position to be in, kind of to on one hand see himself as a facilitator, and then being in kind of the middle of, or in a center of a network.
Yeah,
and that's, I think, is something that impressed me on how also over time how he managed to deal with all the, let's say, the dynamics and uncertainties, and just went along with the process. And of course did many micro things, but kind of also staying in this, you mentioned at the conference, staying in this chaos somehow, in this ever-changing thing he mentioned, this beast he mentioned.
yeah.
That's really impressive for me.
What impressed you, Jesper? What would you say was a highlight?
Sorry, I just logged in. My
okay.
time was different in the calendar. It was supposed to start now, actually. So, but as far as I know, if I'm not quite wrong, I have heard Jonas Wells before. He probably said something about letting people discover it themselves and not pushing it forward. And this is what impresses me. Let them ask, hey, here's some kind of other process. What's going on? Instead of just saying, now we're going to do this, we're going to do this direction, and we're going to do this. More like be it. more
Yeah.
like tell people to be it. Yeah.
Okay, great. How about you, Mark? What impressed you?
So I'd just like to draw attention to the fact that Jonas has been doing this for more than a decade, it seems to me, and therefore the people involved must really trust him.
Mm.
And you know, to do this for a year or two is hard enough, but to keep doing it and keep in that position and keep it going and keep it, I guess, fresh enough and also familiar enough and valuable enough over all that time is a huge achievement.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that was not said explicitly, but I just want to point to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. How about Marika? May I ask you also what impressed you from what you heard, from what you know?
Yeah, I think this is maybe not the favorite part of SF gatherings, but this measuring thing. I think this is so unique, and this is something all organizations and all efforts and all policies always are involved with. And I think what Jonas explained about is that it's extremely important that the progress is measured by the relevance for the end user and their life quality, and that's really like it's me not to bring some technical measures, but that's really super important, and it's also that it's those people themselves who tell this, does it work or not. But in addition to that, here in the model, it's very strongly measuring how the interaction between different agencies and players and people, and that's rare. That's really rare. In very many programs, you ask the end user, and then you look at the finances and like end results, but you neglect where the work is actually happening. And here I think in your model you have this is really so good example of that because that has to be on place for all the results to happen, and it has to be easy for the workers to work in a new way for the something new to happen. And what I love in your model, I have translated one of your questions. You did mention this particular one, but you ask whether the resourceful view regarding human possibilities is shared by everybody in the coordinated effort. So the workers tell their opinion about this, and I think this is such a good question. It really reveals how it is to work in that initiative, and where you should maybe put more effort to. So it's just to mention one impressive thing about it.
Out of many. I would like to mention one as well. And I think for me, it was the partnering. Yeah, you said, I'm not in control. And how do you decide? You partner up with someone. And, you know, to do this and then to create a web of interactions and partnership relationships, that's really impressive, because it's so often it can result in competition, but not in partnering. And that's, I think that's amazing. Yeah, so let's do the second round. Do you want to say something, Jonas?
Just really quickly, because one thing I failed to mention, which I constantly say to the people who are in the process working with us, because most of the time, like Marika says, we're very good at getting to results, and we put all this emphasis on, did we go up or 2% or not? And I always kind of de-emphasize that it doesn't really matter if yes, it's good to know it's getting better, but it's more interesting to ask, so what's getting better? How would, if we have some inkling of it, something's improving, what's most interesting is the follow-up questions, So what's different? What do we think we're doing that's creating this little difference? And that's more interesting than the actual result itself. So inviting all these agencies to follow up their results, and have others. So I know many agencies have seminars where they process the results and have similar kind of questions, and maybe they never heard of solution focus, but they'll be asking questions, so what's actually being made, what's being different, what are we doing differently this year? Because there's a big difference from the year before. So what are people trying to tell us? What are we actually doing? And so there's this kind of creative seminar activity going on, which is actually more interesting than knowing that we went up 5% or something. That's we don't really know that. I mean, the questions are arbitrary. I mean, we don't really know. I mean, measuring is hard enough, especially in complex things, but the discussion itself around progress is much more interesting.
I'd like to ask for the reflection round. So, Mark, would you like to begin? What does this make you think of? What does this remind you of?
I was very taken with what Jonas said about seasons. He used the word seasons, which is very interesting. And there's something about seasons turning around. And this made me think of possibly kind of rhythms and cycles, but not very precise cycles. And that's what I seem to have this impression that, a season, nobody quite knows when the season comes and goes, really. And so this is not every 2 weeks we must do this, or every 3 months we must do that. I had a sense of something much more organic. But nonetheless, if you keep cycling and each time the thing is recognizable but slightly different, there's a sweet spot there, I think. Whereas if every time it's exactly the same, people get bored. And if every time it's completely different, people haven't got a clue. They don't know what's going on. So there's something about the sweet spot of cycling around, and then time comes to do it again. But recognizably family resemblance, recognizably the similar, but not quite the same, and that keeps everyone on their toes and it keeps everyone engaged. And so out of many things, that was one thing I particularly wrote down.
Okay, great. What came across for you, Dominic?
Well, there are many things. I think what I enjoyed the most, is really hearing Jonas' story, and also I think it fits well to his understanding, connects also well to Bates, and seeing all the complexity of the world in a story compared to using a change management model framework with these are the 5 steps, this is the approach, that's what you need to do, to a kind of I think Mark, you said organic way of being in there, and also connects to my question, what is SFOD? It seems like your everyday work, just doing your everyday work, and change is happening all the time, and you're doing good work, and so it's kind of being in this complex situation, doing your best, communicating with each other, and then also telling the story like that. And it would be, if you wrote the book, it would be interesting to see how you could do that without then telling them the 10 steps or 5 elements. And it also reminds me of the workshops we have where, especially with bigger groups, where they want to go out with their actions, for example, or what does that mean now in the 3 most important things, or whatever they want to kind of take out of that. And it connects for me to the difference between the next step and signs of progress. So kind of this development of for a long time, next steps were really important, solution focus, and they need to go out with the next step to maybe it's more important to look for signs of progress and notice these differences. Notice, you said many things about how do we notice change, for example, like the elegant art of noticing. Wim's workshop at the Soul World. How do we notice? And for me, it's not only the noticing, but it's a story we tell each other, because then we tell each other a complex story about the complex world that we still know how that could look like if we move forward, compared to a very simplified version of this is the next step, these are the 3 things, this is the 5-step process. I think that's what I like the most, and what keeps me thinking about how we can conceptualize change in this view.
Well, thank you. How about you, Jesper? What does it make you think about?
Quite simple. It makes me think about if you want to make change, how can you tickle people's curiosity? What Dominic may mention this with invitations. So how to make people curious again, so it doesn't get too complicated. It gets simple, that you can actually know your next steps, what to do within this framework of what you want to start or what you want to change. And in a more, going from, oh no, not that again, to more like, hey, this is interesting. I wonder what could happen.
Thank you, Jesper. And Marika, last but not least, what does it make you think of?
I think it's a remarkable example of how to be solution focused in huge national processes. So I think it's encouraging to see that it is possible, and I think the components are very much the same, we know, but it's how you compose the whole program with solution focused fractals. I think this is a very nice example of the nestedness of solution focus. So actually the huge process of several years has the same elements of solution focus than one tiny discussion. And but you just also yourself have to see to long enough and broad enough to bring it in.
I thought when I read the questions and when I was preparing for our session, I thought, how does this make sense also for people working within organizations? Yeah, and I know that some of you, a lot of the people who are listening right now are working within organizations and also trying to connect different units, different departments, different teams, sometimes even teams in different countries, on different continents. You know, if you're working with international global corporations. So I think we can take a lot from Jonas's example. It may not be the reports or the exact tools that you are using, but I think the approach and the idea that the process is fresh and alive and it needs to be reinvented every moment. We might have some orienting ideas. We might have some solution-focused fractal pieces, but we need to co-create with all the players. And I think that there are a lot of things to be learned. So I'm really grateful that you shared your work with us. So what were your insights? What did you appreciate? What did you like? What reflections did it inspire? Let us hear about that a little bit.
Peter said, look for the smallest step.
What made you think of that? Peter.
I made a connection to the agile world a little bit. So with respect that there's a principle which is called simplicity, the art of maximizing the work not done is essential. So we usually ask, is there a simpler way to the solution? And I connect this to this, make a small step. So is there a smaller step maybe you can take? So that was the connection.
Okay, great. Yeah.
We combined two ideas with Safina and Yoram. It was a great idea because when you work with people that maybe aren't as open, you can call yourself secret formula instead of solution focus. And Safina's going to meet with just a small group that volunteered, the one she knew would, but she'll meet in a way that people walk by and wonder, what is this secret formula group all about? And maybe get some more interested parties.
Okay. Super. Thank you. What else?
Or in a pretty large group, with something that Sue mentioned was something I also resonated with, is the story of Jonas with all these beautiful elements in it. It gave us hope and how do I say it, perspectives that it's possible to facilitate change in macro systems. That was a very joyful feeling actually that arose while hearing the story.
Yeah. Okay. Super. Thank you, Wim. What else?
And we also discussed if it makes a difference if somebody is inside the organization or an external consultant. And then Hannelore said that it's amazing and even more impressive that Jonas for over 10 years keeps on going, being this inviting, curious, warm person who is in the middle of this network. And so getting this motivation again and again. Yeah, that must be something that is, I don't know, that made me thinking that the feedback you get or might be a good motivator for you.
I just, everything was just so impressive. Just that consistency and trusting the process and the what difference and the keeping asking it, and thank you. It was just brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
In our group, we also put or was Wim who kind of said that distinguish between the what and the how. We're impressed how Jonas and of course the people around him and the teams always also put the good collaboration in the center of not just the kind of the result, the progress, but how do we do that together, and focusing on that. And even small things like how do we write an email, what difference will that make if we do that in this or in the other way. And for me, when I don't know who was it who said it was hopeful, I had this feeling like isn't that just everyday work? Like, isn't it just great to be a solution-focused practitioner in whatever we do and just do good solution-focused work for 10 years and then see if we want to and can see them, see all these ripple effects that it has. So assume if we had invited Jonas to tell us the story of his work of the last 10 years, we would have heard a similar story of just doing this in his way. Yeah. So that was cool. Also, the distinction between organizational development and just everyday kind of interactions work. Hopefully we all do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very inspiring. It's almost inspiring me to want to have a proper job. It's that inspiring.
You know, Sue, I always maintain that we are all organizational developers, all of us, because we're all interacting in organizations with organizations.
I've been thinking about which role that plays, because I'm not a consultant.
Exactly
this is my job.
That was my question. Does it make a difference?
I don't know. I think it does actually, because I've chosen this. I mean, I don't think that the clout, as it were, would have been as strong if I only come in as an external.
That was my question.
Working within the system and being recognizable in the system and not being there for my own self or not being dependent on anybody, just doing the work that I'm assigned to do and building more, like Mark was, on trust and relationships and just that wouldn't have been possible as an external consultant. I think there's something about being within the system and then being very free to move within that system. That's another. I mean, that's very consultancy-like. I mean, as a consultant, you're often very free to move around and do your thing, but it's often for a short time. I get to be within the system, but I'm also very fortunate to be very free within that system.
The question is, does it depend on the position you have? So to work freely with each and everybody, things like that. So if I consider someone else, I don't know if you know the term Scrum Master or so, they are usually within a small group there and there. It is very difficult for them to reach out, say, to a CEO who is, I don't know where. Yeah?
I think position counts. I mean, context matters, where we are and what we're doing, who we are in that space matters.
Yeah.
But I would like to add that you can use the same position in very different ways. So you, in a way, also take the freedom and feel your possibility.
Yes, yes.
Probably more freer than you think.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe this is also an aspect to let the people actually remember that they do have power.
Yeah.
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 And nobody can control what you actually say and do in a meeting. Not really.
Yes.
That's always improvised. It's
Yes.
always improvised.
All right, guys, time's up. It was lovely to see you. It was lovely to have these conversations. Lovely to see you all. See you
Thank
soon
you very
again.
much.
Have a wonderful summer. And
Thank you, everybody.